Tear gas chokes the air over the barricades in Cochabamba, Bolivia. Armored vehicles push through screaming crowds. This front line is not about politics or religion. The casualty is the rain. Hard cut. A sterile chiming bell rings at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. December 2020. The ticker flashes NQH20. The substance that makes up 60% of your biology is now a securitized asset. It trades exactly like crude oil and gold. The anomaly is live. I look directly at you because the threat is actively multiplying. While you are sweating over inflation at the grocery store, a hedge fund in Manhattan just quietly purchased the rights to the ancient aquifer beneath your city. The countdown has started. When the next super drought hits and the municipal rivers dry up, they hold the legal deed to your biological survival. Ignorance of this shadow market is no longer bliss. It is a fatal tax paid in blood and thirst. I am embedding you on the absolute front lines of this invisible trillion-dollar resource war. I will hand you the tactical map of the shell companies and megabanks currently executing a hostile takeover of our planet's primary life support system. You are going to learn exactly how to track their paper trail. We have to follow the money right now, before the final remaining drop of public groundwater is aggressively monetized against your own life. We are flying low over the agonizingly dry, fractured bed of the Colorado River. The rotor wash kicks up blinding dust from Earth that used to be submerged. Below us, an abandoned speedboat lies half buried in the cracked mud, a fossil of a dead ecosystem. The dehydration is terminal. We are losing the signal of the natural world. Hard cut. The chaotic, deafening floor of a Wall Street trading desk. Screens are flashing violent red. I am standing right in the crossfire of shouting brokers. The adrenaline here is toxic and contagious. This is the new battlefield. They are not trading soy or microchips. I am watching human survival get priced in real time on these flashing monitors. Every decimal point dropping on the board represents a local reservoir inching closer to critical failure. The market has completely invaded nature, and the invasion is fully automated. To the commodities derivatives trader on this floor, a dry riverbed is not an ecological catastrophe. It is a highly volatile yield curve. Their eyes track the NASDAQ Vélez California Water Index with cold, surgical calculation. Through their optics, human desperation is just another variable to be hedged. They do not see thirsty families or dying crops. They see a beautiful, asymmetric opportunity to short the climate and walk away with massive leverage. The fatal shift occurred in December 2020. Water futures began actively trading on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, quietly crossing an irreversible threshold. For the very first time in human history, the absolute prerequisite for life was chained directly to financial speculation. The algorithms do not care about the physical reality of the ecosystem. They only care about the spread. The lifeblood of the earth was transformed into a casino chip. This was not an accident. It was a highly coordinated structural reform of nature itself. By securitizing the aquifers, Wall Street successfully abstracted the physical substance into a digital derivative. The traders executing these massive volume orders do not need a pipeline or a reservoir. They only need the mathematical guarantee that the resource will become incredibly scarce, incredibly fast. The volatility is the entire point of the operation. The financial index specifically tracks the spot price of water rights in California's most severely depleted agricultural basins. This geographical tether creates a terrifying dynamic. A suite of quantitative analysts sitting in heavily air-conditioned, bulletproof offices in Midtown New York can now actively bet on the severity of West Coast droughts. They are financially incentivized to pray for a complete lack of rainfall in the San Joaquin Valley. When the snowpack in the Sierra Nevada mountains fails to materialize, the algorithms on this trading floor trigger a massive buying frenzy. The drier the soil gets, the higher the portfolio returns climb. It is a zero-sum game, played with the hydration of millions of American citizens. The front line of this war is entirely asymmetrical. The speculators hold all the derivative contracts, while the local municipalities are left holding an empty, dusty pipe. This financial maneuver shattered a fundamental psychological barrier that protected humanity for 10,000 years. Since the dawn of civilization, water functioned as a shared public commons. It belonged to the ecosystem. Now, it has violently transitioned into an aggressively guarded, heavily privatized financial asset. The legal definition of rain has been rewritten in corporate boardrooms, stripping it from the public trust and locking it in a vault. The institutional investors driving this hostile takeover are not looking for modest stability. They are targeting an aggressive return on investment of over 15% annually. You cannot extract a 15% infinite yield from a finite, collapsing biological system without causing massive collateral damage. To hit those quarterly targets, the price of survival must mathematically double, and then double again, until the middle class snaps. We are witnessing the ultimate commodification of the human body. The brokers screaming on this floor are not selling a luxury good. They have cornered the market on a biological hostage situation. Every time the index surges, the cost of basic sanitation and hydration skyrockets for working-class neighborhoods on the other side of the continent. The financial instrument is functioning exactly as designed. It is extracting wealth through the sheer terror of thirst. This is the creeping dread of the 21st century. The market has figured out how to financialize our absolute vulnerability. We are locked in a countdown where every missed storm system translates to billions of dollars in corporate dividends. The architecture of this market requires disaster to sustain its momentum. If the rains return, the portfolio crashes. Therefore, the smart money is heavily leveraged on a permanent, unbreakable drought. It is the ultimate paradox of pricing life. How do you actually assign a hard dollar value to something as elemental as the rain falling from the sky? You do not price the water itself. You assign the value by betting massive capital on exactly when that water will stop falling. The anomaly is priced in. The trap is set. And the countdown to day zero is currently ticking on a server rack in Lower Manhattan. We are already out of time. But those financial derivatives trading in Lower Manhattan require a physical asset to back them up. The spreadsheets demand a yield, and that yield is extracted directly from the dirt beneath my boots. I'm standing in the middle of a buckled, shattered highway in California's San Joaquin Valley. The asphalt is violently torn apart, jagged and uneven. The earth here is physically collapsing under the relentless pressure of Wall Street's algorithmic demands. To the hydrogeologist tracking these fault lines, this destroyed pavement is not a structural engineering failure. It is a geological death rattle. Right next to me is a wooden utility pole. Painted on the wood, exactly 5 feet above my head, is a stark red line. That red mark indicates where the ground level was just a single decade ago. I can feel the low, rhythmic vibration of industrial pumps in my chest. The entire valley floor is rapidly sinking. This introduces a terrifying anomaly that the markets absolutely refuse to price in. We are not just running out of surface water. The ground is literally eating itself. The physical sensation of the earth dropping beneath your feet fundamentally changes the equation. The crisis is not merely a temporary lack of rain. We are permanently destroying the ancient subterranean geologic container that actually holds the water in the first place. Massive agricultural conglomerates are deploying industrial-scale hardware, pumping ancient groundwater out of the earth so aggressively that the bedrock is giving way. In parts of California, the land is currently plummeting by up to 1 foot per year. The scientific term for this geological violence is subsidence. To the observer on the ground, it looks like a slow-motion earthquake, systematically tearing apart roads, bridges, and municipal aqueducts. These extraction operations are not using standard farming equipment. We are talking about deep-bore rigs, originally designed for the petroleum industry, retrofitted to chase the retreating water table hundreds of feet below the surface. They run 24 hours a day, burning thousands of gallons of diesel fuel, pulling up prehistoric water to irrigate miles of corporate-owned crops. The sheer mechanical force is literally sucking the structural integrity out of the state. The terrifying reality of subsidence is that it is a strictly one-way street. Once an aquifer is drained dry, the microscopic architecture of the porous rock is utterly crushed under the immense weight of the earth above it. The structural matrix collapses entirely. It means that even if a miraculous superstorm arrives and it rains continuously for 100 years, that ruined aquifer can never hold a single drop of water again. The hydrogeologist looks at the compacted soil and sees a permanent biological eviction. We are taking a natural storage reservoir that took thousands of millennia to form, and we are obliterating it in a single generation for a quarterly profit margin. You cannot reverse this process. Once the subterranean sponge is crushed into solid rock, the ecosystem's capacity to store emergency reserves during a drought is permanently erased from the map. But the catastrophe extending beneath our feet is not isolated to the shattered highways of the West Coast. The exact same mechanized extraction is cannibalizing the absolute heartland of the American food supply. The front line of this silent war stretches across the Great Plains, where the very foundation of the nation's agricultural independence is currently being pumped into oblivion to satisfy the explosive demands of the derivatives market. Deep beneath the central United States lies the Ogallala Aquifer, a massive underground ocean that spans 8 separate states. This single geological formation provides the essential hydration for 1/5 of the entire nation's wheat and corn harvest. Right now, fleets of mechanized corporate pumps are draining this subterranean reserve at a staggering rate 10 times faster than the natural water cycle can ever hope to replenish it. This is a brutal, unforgiving mathematical equation where the variables are measured in gigaliters and human lives. The Ogallala is largely composed of fossil water trapped underground during the last ice age. It is a finite, non-renewable resource, exactly like a crude oil deposit. When the hydrogeologist maps the rapid depletion rate against the massive corporate extraction quotas, the timeline terminates in a hard, unavoidable zero. Standing in the choking dust kicked up by these industrial megapumps, the scale of the theft becomes intensely visceral. We are liquidating our biological safety net to generate a temporary surge in commodity yields. The brokers back in Chicago are trading futures on a system that is physically collapsing. They are betting on the engineered death of the soil. The faster the aquifer drains, the higher the index spikes, and the closer we step to the precipice. Every inch this highway drops is a direct result of a financial transaction executed on a server thousands of miles away. The red line on that utility pole is not just a marker of geological failure. It is a monument to unregulated greed. We have built an entire economic superstructure that demands the total eradication of our own life support system. The market is not glitching. It is ruthlessly operating exactly as it was designed to. But the physical destruction of the land is only the most visible symptom of this trillion-dollar heist. The real terror lies in the paperwork authorizing these giant diesel pumps. The signatures on the deeds do not belong to local farmers. They belong to shell companies and shadow entities executing a strategy so predatory it is economically evicting entire communities. We need to track exactly whose names are on those extraction permits. I am standing inside a desolate, sun-bleached county clerk's office in a rural desert town. Outside, the earth is literally collapsing under the weight of industrial pumping. But the real front line of this war is right here, buried in these filing cabinets. We need to track exactly whose names are on the deeds authorizing those giant diesel pumps. The destruction of the aquifer is not a natural disaster. It is a highly coordinated, fully legal extraction operation, and the paper trail starts in this suffocating, dust-filled room. Sifting through decades of property records, a terrifying anomaly emerges from the ink. You would expect to see the names of local farming families, multi-generational operators desperately trying to keep their crops alive in the drought. Instead, the recent buyers are a ghost fleet of anonymous limited liability companies. They are aggressively purchasing completely dead, barren farms, land so scorched and depleted that it cannot grow a single blade of wheat. Why are Wall Street billionaires suddenly buying up useless dirt? This is the Trojan horse of modern agriculture. The hedge funds and private equity firms executing these purchases do not care about the soil, and they absolutely do not care about growing your food. They are hunting a completely different asset. To the naked eye, a scorched 100-acre plot in the desert is a worthless financial liability. But to a Manhattan derivatives trader looking at a satellite map, that dead farm is a gold mine. They are not buying the land. They are buying the invisible history attached to it. These financial predators are executing a brutal strategy known in the industry as buy and dry. It is a tactical liquidation of rural America. The hedge funds purchase the failing agricultural land strictly to capture the underlying historical water rights. Once the deed is signed, they immediately cease all farming operations. The tractors are sold, the fields are abandoned to the wind, and the local agricultural economy is systematically starved of capital. The farm dies, so the portfolio can thrive. The contrast is physically sickening. I hold a fragile, yellowed deed from 1922 in my hands, smelling the dry dust of a ruined family legacy. At this exact moment, 1,000 miles away, the new owner of this water is sitting in a sleek, glass-walled private equity firm in Manhattan. They have never touched this dirt. They have never felt the punishing heat of this sun. But with the stroke of a pen, they have legally severed the water from the land, hijacking the biological lifeblood of this entire county. How is this legal? The weapon they are using is a bizarre, antiquated legal framework called the prior appropriation doctrine. In the American West, this doctrine dictates that water rights are completely severed from land ownership. It is a first-in-time, first-in-right system. The original pioneer families who claimed the water a century ago hold the senior rights. By buying up these specific legacy farms, Shell companies instantly acquire supreme legal authority over the regional aquifer, bypassing local government entirely. Under the rules of prior appropriation, these corporations do not have to use the water where they pump it. They can strip the vital resource entirely out of the rural counties that desperately depend on it. This is not about sharing the burden of a drought. It is a forced transfer of wealth and survival. The shell companies pipe this ancient groundwater hundreds of miles away, selling it at a massive premium to the highest-bidding luxury developments, industrial tech parks, and sprawling artificial desert golf courses. You are witnessing an invisible, ruthless economic eviction. When the hedge funds suck the water out of a farming basin to feed a luxury subdivision, the surrounding rural communities are left with nothing but blowing dust and plummeting property values. The local hardware stores close. The schools lose funding. The town effectively ceases to exist. This is the frontline impact of treating a biological necessity as a liquid asset. The elites secure their oasis, while the working class is handed a death sentence by dehydration. The scale of this corporate takeover is staggering, and it is happening in total secrecy. Between the years 2015 and 2023, institutional investors poured an estimated $10 billion into acquiring private water rights across the American West. $10 billion quietly deployed to monopolize the rain. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is a meticulously documented capital reallocation strategy. The billionaires are preparing for day zero, and they are buying up the lifeboats. Tracking this $10 billion tsunami of cash is like fighting shadows in a war zone. The private equity firms do not want you to know they own your drinking water. They operate through impenetrable layers of anonymous, limited liability companies with names that sound like harmless agricultural co-ops. They use algorithmic precision to identify distressed municipalities, targeting the weakest, most drought-stricken regions. They hit the front line, secure the asset, and vanish behind a wall of corporate lawyers and non-disclosure agreements. We are moving past the tipping point of market logic and entering a phase of pure survivalist hoarding. When a private entity controls the primary source of fresh water for a collapsing region, they do not just hold a monopoly on a commodity. They hold a monopoly on human life. The people living in these targeted zones are completely unaware that their future has already been sold. They turn on their taps, oblivious to the fact that the pressure in their pipes is now dictated by a profit margin calculated in a skyscraper. This localized destruction is terrifying, but it is only the domestic front of a much larger global resource war. The hedge funds are piping the water to domestic luxury markets, but the extraction gets infinitely darker when you look beyond our borders. The very concept of national sovereignty is dissolving into the aquifer. We are not just losing the water to Manhattan bankers. A massive volume of our most critical survival resource is being quietly loaded onto cargo ships and sent across the ocean, right under our noses. The paperwork in this dusty clerk's office reveals a chilling truth. The American West is being systematically liquidated by domestic shell companies. But as I dig deeper into these corporate registries, a new pattern emerges, pointing to an even more dangerous adversary. The extraction pumps are running 24 hours a day, draining the earth dry. But the final destination for millions of gallons is not even on this continent. To understand the true scale of this heist, we have to follow the water out into the midnight desert. The midnight desert in Arizona is completely black to the naked eye. But through these night vision goggles, the landscape explodes into a blinding, radioactive green. I am watching a highly synchronized industrial extraction operation. Massive combine harvesters move in tactical formation under floodlights, cutting down endless rows of crops. It looks exactly like a military staging ground. The air vibrates. You can feel the rhythmic, concussive thumping in your chest before you even hear it. These are high-capacity industrial diesel pumps, ripping ancient reserves out of the earth at maximum velocity. We tracked the shell companies buying up this barren land, and this is exactly what they are doing with it. They are running a bizarre, resource-draining black site. The target of this harvesting in the middle of an arid wasteland is alfalfa. It is one of the most intensely water-heavy crops on the planet, thriving here only because of the sheer violence of those subterranean pumps. But this creates a terrifying paradox. Why burn millions of dollars to grow a low-value forage crop in a desert that is rapidly running completely out of water? The answer reveals the most brilliant and devastating smuggling route in modern history. This is the invisible pipeline. How do you export 1 billion gallons of an intensely monitored, highly restricted physical resource across the ocean without a single government regulator noticing? You do not pump it into massive tanker ships. You hide it entirely in plain sight. You transform the liquid asset into a solid. Foreign corporations, operating out of incredibly water-starved nations in the Middle East, have found a massive loophole. They are quietly buying thousands of acres right here in the unregulated zones of the American Southwest. They purchase the dirt for pennies, but the ultimate prize is the unlimited, unmetered access to the aquifer below. They flood this desert floor with millions of gallons of your domestic groundwater to grow this alfalfa. The green stalks absorb the moisture, locking the liquid inside their cellular walls. The harvesters then slash it down, bale it, and compress it under immense pressure. They are literally shrink-wrapping your survival resource into dry, easily transportable green bricks. These compressed bales are loaded onto heavy diesel trucks, driven to deep water ports on the west coast, and packed into standard cargo containers. From there, they are shipped thousands of miles across the Pacific Ocean. Their final destination is massive commercial dairy feedlots in foreign deserts. They are feeding your critical groundwater to foreign cattle halfway across the globe. This is the deadly mechanics of virtual water. By exporting the water-intensive crop, they are effectively exporting trillions of gallons of American blue gold, completely bypassing domestic regulations and export tariffs. It is a massive, unregulated geopolitical hemorrhage, and the collateral damage on the front lines of this extraction zone is immediate, brutal, and entirely legal. To sustain this synthetic oasis, these foreign operations utilize heavy-duty mega-wells. We are not talking about a standard agricultural pipe. These are colossal industrial boreholes capable of pumping up to 3,000 gallons per minute. That is a vortex of suction so violently powerful that it alters the subterranean hydrology for miles in every direction. The earth is being gutted. Just 3 miles down the road from this floodlit operation, a local family woke up this morning, turned on their kitchen faucet, and got nothing but a blast of dry air and brown dust. The industrial suction of the mega wells completely collapsed the water table overnight. Residential wells are going permanently dry, while the corporate pumps roar on, undisturbed and completely legal. The sheer, terrifying absurdity of this geopolitical equation is playing out right now. Local communities in the United States are watching their taps sputter and die. They are being forced to drive to big-box stores to buy plastic bottles of imported water just to cook their dinner, while their own ancient, localized groundwater is being systematically exported to a desert on another continent. If the absolute insanity of this scale blows your mind, hit the like button right now. The infrastructure of your survival is being dismantled, packed into cargo ships, and traded away in the dead of night. Do you think we stand a chance against this level of corporate extraction? Let me know in the comments. And to ensure you do not miss the solution to this mystery, subscribe to the channel. This is not just a localized environmental tragedy. It is a calculated, structural vulnerability. When a sovereign nation allows foreign entities to buy unlimited access to its deepest aquifers, it surrenders its strategic autonomy. The very foundation of domestic food security is being actively hollowed out by the sheer gravitational pull of international capital. We are witnessing a hostile biological takeover. The water that fell as rain thousands of years ago, trapped safely beneath the bedrock, is now evaporating into the atmosphere of a foreign feedlot. Every single drop pumped out of this Arizona dirt tonight is a drop that will never return to this ecosystem. The pipeline only flows one way, and the reservoir is crashing fast. The physical extraction on this battlefield is staggering, stripping the landscape bare with brute mechanical force. But as terrifying as these diesel megawells are, they are only the slow physical arm of the beast. The real multiplier effect, the true weapon of mass financial destruction, operates completely silently. It does not use pumps. It uses code. The physical extraction tearing the aquifers apart out in the desert is massive. The megawells and industrial diesel pumps are a brutal mechanical force. But the real multiplier effect, the true weapon of mass financial destruction, happens when that physical scarcity is fed directly into Wall Street's algorithms. The front line of this resource war is not a dusty trench. It is right here. I'm standing inside a brutally cold, secure server room. Row upon row of black racks flashing blue lights stretch out in the darkness. The chilling, relentless hum of industrial cooling fans drowns out everything else. On the laptop screen in my hands, a global heat map is bleeding red. This is the central nervous system of the modern market. Through the eyes of a commodities derivatives trader watching this exact feed, those red flashes are not warning signs of an ecological collapse. They are high-speed buy signals. Every millisecond, algorithmic trading bots are executing thousands of water futures trades. The machine that drinks has been officially activated. This is the ultimate, terrifying paradox of the 21st century. We have created artificial intelligence that is actively learning to hoard our most vital biological resource before a drought even hits the evening news. The warfare raging inside these servers is entirely digital, but the casualties it produces are strictly biological. How do you front-run a climate disaster? You build a digital predator. High-frequency trading algorithms are now explicitly programmed to ingest massive streams of orbital intelligence. They pull down live satellite weather data, intercept soil moisture indexes, and scrape global geopolitical news feeds in real time. The machine is reading the planet like an open book. Long before a farmer looks at a dry sky, the algorithm has already processed the atmospheric pressure drop. It uses that data to execute highly aggressive preemptive trades on water futures. The code is buying the exclusive rights to the rain before the clouds even form. To the trader monitoring the dashboard, the efficiency is beautiful. To the rest of us, it is a mathematical death sentence. By anticipating drought conditions weeks before they are officially declared by any state or federal agency, these algorithms allow Manhattan hedge funds to corner the market on human survival. The sheer speed of this execution creates an incredibly dangerous phenomenon: synthetic scarcity. The water might still physically be sitting in the reservoir, but on the digital ledger, it is entirely locked up. The algorithms artificially inflate the spot price of water rights, driving the cost up by 10, 20, or 30% in a matter of milliseconds. This invisible price manipulation creates a catastrophic trap for local communities. The synthetic scarcity forces municipal governments, the very people responsible for keeping the water flowing to your kitchen sink, to pay exorbitant ransom prices to overcome a deficit created entirely by lines of code. The trap closes fast. The temperature spikes. A historic heat wave hits a major metropolitan area. The local reservoir drops below the critical intake line. The city manager panics and attempts to buy emergency water on the open market to keep the grid from collapsing. They are stepping right into the kill zone. That city is no longer negotiating with a neighboring county or a local dam operator. They are forced into a brutal, high-speed bidding war against billion-dollar supercomputers. These machines are optimized solely for maximum profit extraction, and they know exactly how desperate the human buyer on the other end is. They can smell the thirst in the data. You cannot outbid an algorithm that operates at the speed of light. The machine holds the water hostage until the municipality drains its emergency budget. The city is forced to issue municipal bonds, essentially taking on massive public debt, just to buy back the exact same water that used to be an unalienable public right. This is the cold, calculated extraction of wealth through absolute, biological necessity. The derivatives trader watches the profit margins spike on the screen and closes the position. The hedge fund secures a massive quarterly return. Meanwhile, the city is left financially gutted, passing the inflated cost directly onto the residents. You are the ultimate yield in this terrifying equation. Every time you turn on the tap during a dry summer, a fraction of a cent is being siphoned off by a server rack sitting in the dark. The market has perfectly mapped your desperation. The algorithms have mathematically proven that you will pay absolutely any price to stay alive. But what happens when the public can no longer afford the synthetic price? When the algorithm prices the working class completely out of the survival market, the social system fractures. The digital war creates a terrifying physical divide on the ground, and the reality of who gets to drink and who gets cut off is about to become brutally visible. The digital war just became a physical front line. I am standing outside a massive wrought iron gate in one of the wealthiest zip codes in California. The sun is absolutely blinding. Beyond these iron bars, you see acres of flawlessly manicured emerald lawns and the sharp blue glare of an Olympic-sized private pool. The water sprinklers are firing in a steady, hypnotic rhythm. Less than 5 miles down the road, the reality is entirely different. I walked the bed of the public reservoir this morning. It is a cracked, dusty basin. The only moisture left is a single, pathetic trickle of brown sludge baking in the 100-degree heat. This is the brutal, physical consequence of that algorithmic price hike. The financial fracture has manifested as a two-tiered system of survival. We are entering the era of the green zone, a militarized economic fortress where the elemental laws of nature simply do not apply. The state declares a catastrophic emergency. They tell you to take shorter showers. They beg you to let your modest front yard die. But look through these gates. When the municipal taps are throttled for the general public, how is this oasis still perfectly hydrated? This is not a glitch in the distribution system. This is a deliberate, mathematically engineered inequality. You are watching the privatization of a biological necessity operating exactly as designed. The public is subjected to rationing, while the elite simply purchase immunity from the drought. The terrifying question isn't whether the water will run out. It is who gets to decide who goes thirsty. During the extreme drought mandates in 2022, the divide became undeniable. Authorities deployed water police to patrol working-class neighborhoods. Ordinary citizens faced devastating heavy fines for merely keeping a small vegetable garden alive. The threat of a ruined credit score or a disconnected water meter hung over every single household. Panic was the daily reality. But the data reveals a sickening parallel reality. While the middle class watched their lawns turn to dust, the most elite residential zip codes did not just maintain their water usage, they dramatically increased their consumption without a single penalty. The helicopters circling above captured an archipelago of lush, overflowing estates surrounded by a vast sea of brown, dying vegetation. The system is completely rigged by the architecture of the law itself. The financial penalty structure for overpumping or excessive use is entirely broken. These fines are issued as flat, fixed amounts. If you are living paycheck to paycheck, a $500 citation is an absolute catastrophe. It means your family skips meals. It acts as an ironclad deterrent for the working class. But to a billionaire hedge fund manager, a $500 fine is statistically meaningless. It is not a punishment. It merely functions as a minor operational fee. It is the cheap price of admission to keep the decorative fountains running while the county burns. The law, in its majestic equality, only restricts the poor. Wealth buys a total exemption from the collapsing climate. I am watching the landscaping crews adjust the automated irrigation system right now. They are literally spraying our collective future into the air just to cool the pavement. This water is pulled from the exact same failing underground aquifer that supplies the dying public reservoir down the road. It is a zero-sum game of biological survival, and the scoreboard is rigged by offshore accounts. But the hostile takeover does not stop at the gates of these mega mansions. The extraction is moving directly into the failing public grids. Private equity corporations are quietly stepping into the void left by bankrupt municipalities. They are locking down massive, multi-decade municipal utility contracts. They are buying the actual pipes that run directly into your kitchen sink. The moment the ink dries on these privatization contracts, the trap snaps shut. These corporate entities immediately execute aggressive, unyielding rate hikes. We are seeing utility bills spike by up to 300% in a matter of months. They transform a crumbling civic infrastructure into a high-yield asset class, squeezing the absolute maximum revenue out of a captive population. This is a siege tactic implemented on a domestic population. Vulnerable demographics are suddenly pushed to the absolute brink. I have spoken with families who are now forced into an impossible, agonizing daily calculation. They must actively choose between paying for clean drinking water and buying basic groceries for their children. The basic math of human survival is weaponized against them. This isn't just an economic crisis. It is an active biological assault. The private water corporations know you have absolutely zero leverage. You cannot simply opt out of hydration. They've backed you into a corner where your biological instinct to survive forces you to hand over whatever capital you have left. The water flows uphill to money, and the resulting vacuum sucks the life from the streets. And the most terrifying part? This is perfectly legal. The municipal boards, desperate for cash to fix broken mains, hand over the keys to the kingdom. They trade away the sovereign right to water for a quick injection of corporate capital. The citizens become tenants in their own bodies, paying rent to a holding company just to sustain the 60% of their cells made of H2O. We are witnessing the collapse of the social contract right here on the pavement. But this hyper-local inequality is merely a beta test for a much darker, global operation. If private equity can conquer a domestic municipality and cut off the taps to American citizens, imagine what happens when this exact same ruthless logic is applied to the international borders of transboundary rivers. If private equity can conquer a domestic municipality, the natural progression is total geopolitical escalation. The local inequality we just witnessed inevitably scales up into international conflict. Private hoarding has forced governments into desperate, militarized actions. I am riding shotgun in a heavily armored truck escorting a water tanker through the parched desert. The windshield is reinforced ballistic glass. This is what the future of basic logistics looks like. I have to shout over the deafening roar of the massive diesel engine. Outside, the landscape is cracked, desperate, and devoid of life. We are guarding a liquid payload that is now more valuable than crude oil. This convoy represents the intelligence community's darkest secret. The Pentagon has officially stopped wargaming petroleum conflicts. They are now actively mapping the Earth's remaining aquifers. The global chessboard has fundamentally changed. The countdown timer is already ticking. We are tracking a rapidly accelerating, irreversible geopolitical collapse. Declassified intelligence community assessments from 2024 paint a terrifyingly precise picture. They project that by the year 2030, global demand for freshwater will outstrip reliable supply by exactly 40%. This is not a theoretical model. It is a locked-in, mathematical certainty of systemic failure. A 40% deficit in human hydration means the immediate collapse of regional stability. When the taps run dry, borders dissolve. Intelligence analysts are bracing for unprecedented mass migrations. We are talking about hundreds of millions of climate refugees fleeing dead zones in the Middle East, North Africa, and the American Southwest. This demographic shockwave will overwhelm the security infrastructure of every developed nation on the planet. The battle lines are already drawn along the world's major waterways. The control of transboundary rivers, such as the Nile and the Mekong, has completely shifted. We have abandoned diplomatic treaties. Nations are now engaged in aggressive unilateral dam-building projects. Upstream countries are choking off the survival of downstream neighbors. They are effectively turning river flow into a highly calibrated weapon of mass coercion. Turn off the water, and you paralyze an entire sovereign state without firing a single bullet. The grand Ethiopian Renaissance dam can hold back enough of the Blue Nile to starve Egyptian agriculture in a matter of weeks. On the Mekong, networks of upstream concrete barriers dictate whether downstream fishing communities in Vietnam survive the season. Water infrastructure is no longer civic engineering. It is a loaded gun, pointed directly at the head of a neighboring nation. The truck hits a massive pothole in the ruined asphalt, violently jarring my spine against the seat. The armed guard next to me tightens his grip on his rifle. He isn't scanning the horizon for political insurgents. He is looking for desperate, thirsty citizens. When survival is stripped away, the social contract incinerates instantly. We are driving through the prologue of the next World War, and the primary objective is splashing inside the steel tank behind us. The militarization of international rivers mirrors the silent corporate warfare happening inside our own borders. As private equity relentlessly consolidates control over the last remaining domestic aquifers, the stakes escalate from financial ruin to outright kinetic conflict. National security analysts issue the same grim warning across the board. The next major global conflicts will absolutely not be fought over access to fossil fuels. The era of the petrodollar is over. The coming bloodshed will be fought exclusively over access to potable blue gold. You can engineer synthetic alternatives for gasoline, and you can power a grid with solar radiation, but there is absolutely no laboratory substitute for the hydrogen and oxygen molecules required to keep your internal organs functioning. That brutal biological inelasticity is exactly what makes water the ultimate geopolitical leverage. We are witnessing a catastrophic vulnerability in our national defense. While the military-industrial complex spent decades securing petroleum supply chains in the Persian Gulf, hedge funds quietly bought the groundwater beneath our domestic military bases. You do not need an intercontinental ballistic missile to cripple an empire. You simply buy the legal rights to the local water table and systematically pump the surrounding civilian infrastructure completely dry. The intelligence reports sit in classified servers, detailing the exact timeline of the crash. When the 40% supply deficit hits in 2030, the open market will violently fracture. Spot prices for water futures will skyrocket beyond the reach of sovereign treasuries. We will see the immediate default of developing nations. They will be forced to trade away their remaining natural resources just to lease enough water to keep their populations breathing. Another jolt from the road. The radio crackles with encrypted static. The escort convoy maintains a tight, defensive formation. This level of heavily armed security for a basic utility delivery tells you everything you need to know about the New World Order. We've transitioned from an economy of abundance into a zero-sum game of biological survival. Every drop in that tank represents a fraction of a second of human life, guarded by Kevlar and hollow-point ammunition. The algorithmic trading bots we saw manipulating the market are essentially calling in artillery strikes on the working class. They artificially spike the price, creating synthetic droughts. Then, the private equity firms lock down the physical infrastructure. Finally, the military is deployed to manage the resulting civil unrest. It is a perfectly integrated cycle of extraction, privatization, and violent enforcement. The corporate capture of our life support is complete. You must understand the sheer velocity of this threat. The geopolitical map is rapidly redrawing itself around these diminishing subterranean lakes. Treaties are being shredded. Armies are repositioning. The billionaires retreating to their elite green zones know exactly what is coming over the horizon. They are stockpiling the only asset that guarantees survival when the global logistics chain snaps. They are hoarding the liquid foundation of life itself. As the armored convoy rumbles toward the heavily fortified municipal gates, the absolute reality of the situation sets in. We are not just losing a public utility. We are losing our basic autonomy as a species. The weaponization of drought has created a hostage situation on a planetary scale. You are standing directly in the blast radius of a biological time bomb, and the countdown clock is accelerating faster than any government model predicted. The engines of the armored convoy cut out, and in the sudden silence, the global scale of this conflict collapses into something terrifyingly intimate. We spent this war watching nations posture over transboundary rivers, but the true battlefield is the space between your own cells. I am standing in the dark, watching a single drop of condensation swell on a withered leaf. It falls, but it does not hit the dirt. It lands squarely inside a steel vault, and the door slams shut with an echoing clang. 0 hour has already passed, and we did not even hear the detonation. There are no sirens ringing across the shattered pavement of the San Joaquin Valley, no medics rushing to the depleted megawells in the desert. The casualties of this war are not counted in shrapnel wounds, but in the slow, agonizing metric of municipal dehydration. We are standing in the ruins of the public commons, assessing the damage of a hostile takeover that was entirely legal, perfectly optimized, and practically invisible. The architects of this crisis understand the ultimate vulnerability of our biology. You can boycott a tech monopoly or protest fossil fuels by refusing to drive, but you absolutely cannot negotiate with thirst. A human being can survive for weeks without food, but you have exactly 3 days without water before your vital organs shut down. In the cold calculus of the commodities market, that biological timer creates an asset with a mathematically infinite inelasticity of demand. When we started tracking this contagion on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, it looked like a standard financial derivative. We watched brokers in tailored suits assigning a risk premium to the rain. But that was a tactical deception. By severing historical water rights from the physical land, private equity firms fundamentally rewired the architecture of survival. They did not just buy the failing farms and the collapsing aquifers. They purchased the legal deeds to the foundational mechanism of life itself. We watched algorithmic trading bots ingest satellite data to predict the drought before the soil ever cracked. Those supercomputers were not just speculating. They were executing preemptive strikes on municipal reserves. They manufactured synthetic scarcity, driving the spot price of blue gold so high that ordinary neighborhoods were priced out of existence. It is a terrifying realization that your physiological need to drink is currently locked in a high-frequency bidding war against a machine. The intelligence briefings warned us about the 40% global freshwater deficit arriving by 2030, but they misidentified the enemy. They planned for sovereign armies battling over transboundary rivers, completely missing the corporate mercenaries operating within our own borders. While the Pentagon was busy mapping foreign threats, domestic hedge funds were using agricultural shell companies to secretly extract and export trillions of gallons of our groundwater across the ocean. This is the new architecture of subjugation. Wall Street recognized that whoever controls the subterranean lakes dictates who gets to survive the coming climate shift. By monopolizing the aquifers, they have effectively turned the entire population into a captive biological yield. You are no longer viewed as a citizen with fundamental human rights. You are a guaranteed return on investment. Every time you open a tap, you are paying a mandatory dividend to a phantom corporation just to keep your blood flowing. The sheer brilliance of this campaign lies in its utter silence. The infrastructure of our survival was quietly sold off while we were distracted by inflation and political theater. In this 21st century war, the bombs are not dropping from the sky. They are being pumped directly from the ground beneath your feet, 1 gallon at a time. We permitted the privatization of the exact chemical compound required to sustain life, and the violent bill for that ignorance has finally come due. We are the last witnesses to the end of free water, and documenting this front line is the only defense we have left against total corporate capture. If this investigation has fundamentally altered how you view the rain falling outside your window, hit the subscribe button to continue this critical intelligence gathering with us. Leave a dispatch in the comments below about the water security in your own city. We need to map this shadow market together before the ultimate monopoly locks us out completely. Look closely at the dust settling over the sinking highways of the West. This is not a temporary drought waiting for a seasonal shift. This is the engineered baseline of our new reality. The elite green zones will continue to flourish behind wrought iron gates, protected by private security and unlimited capital, while the rest of the planet fights over the evaporating remnants of the public commons. The storm has passed, the water is gone, and we are left stranded in a desert of our own making. We traded the sacred right of biological survival for a fractional point of market yield, permanently turning the fundamental essence of life into a financial weapon aimed directly at our own throats. The steel vault is locked, the algorithmic ticker is moving, and the terrible, irreversible thirst of the future is already priced in. Stay vigilant, keep your eyes on the ground, and always guard your reserves. Signing off.